My first paranormal experience was at my father's farm in Kansas back in 2004. The house was built in 1845 and was the site of a Civil War battle between the Kansas militia and the Missouri Confederate Army. One night, I was up late and decided to get something to drink. I walked into the kitchen and I heard someone walk through the living room and down the hall towards my dad's room. It sounded like they were wearing boots. I turned around and saw no one. If it were a person, I would have seen them because the living room is next to the kitchen and they would have had to walk into the kitchen and turn and go down the hall. Another time, around July of '06, at the same house, my sister and I were playing PlayStation at around 1 a.m. and we heard someone open the front door, walk through the living room, through the kitchen, and down into the hall. I had my bedroom door open the whole time, and all we saw was a shadow past the door towards my dad's room. The weird thing is that the front door is notoriously hard to open. You have to shoulder check it to get it open, and my dad was redoing the wood floor in the living room, so it was just dirt. We wouldn't have heard anyone walking around on it. And in the morning, we told my father, and he showed us boot prints in the dirt that had CSA stamped on the bottom. The last experience at my dad's farm was in 2009. My dad and I had spent the day hunting boar, and we were too tired to clean the guns, so we left them out on the dining room table. We were woken up at around 2 a.m. to loud bangs. It almost sounded like a gunshot. Our dogs were going crazy outside, so my dad and I went to see what was up, and everything went quiet as we walked into the dining room. Then we heard the boots walk into the dining room, and one of my dad's old revolvers began spinning on the table. We did a lot of research on the local history of the farm, and found it was in the area of one of the bloodiest battles in the war. Given the location of these events and the history of this area, along with several witness accounts of seeing ghostly forms of what looked to be Civil War soldiers, I would kind of put this in the category of just that. The witness describes seeing his dad's revolver start spinning on a table. He also describes hearing what should be somebody walking right in front of him, and also seeing some sort of shadow pass by him. These events qualify as strange unknowns. I'm sure most of you have heard stories of ghosts speaking through white noise, or using radio devices to try and pick up communications from the other side. This next story kind of delves into that. It was the year my friend's wife had tragically died, 2012 or 2013. He invited me and a friend to his house just days after she passed, claiming his wife had called him and left a message on his landline. Another friend of hers claimed she'd received a bank email from her around the same time. We wanted to console our friend who had just lost his wife and mother of his child, so we went to the house with him and checked out his story. The message had no time signature, yet it had a date. No caller ID at all, though. We listened intently, waiting for it to be a joke or something else explainable. The message was convoluted, with a strange white noise, and lasted about 2 to 3 minutes. About 90 seconds in, we heard a distinct voice. The voice was certainly there. I'd met and spoke to her before, so I had an idea of what she sounded like. This was definitely a woman speaking, but I couldn't be sure if it was her. Who else could it have been? I couldn't make any real discernible words of what she was saying. All I can say is that the tone of voice was very sorrowful and explanatory. It stood every hair on end. We listened several times, trying to make out words. I just couldn't get over how her wordless testimony stirred up so much empathy. It was as real as anything. Fast forward to July of this year. I'm working at a tavern where the longtime owner had just given in to cancer just the night before. We were having trouble with the phones there that day. No dial tone. They wouldn't turn off. I was concerned because my boss always calls to see how much money I'm making her, and I didn't have a cell phone at the time. I brought up the previous experience to a couple sitting at the bar. They looked at me like I was full of shit and played along. Not 30 seconds into my story, the phone rings. I answered. Nothing. I chalked it up to the phone acting up because they didn't pay the bill or something, and continued my story. When I looked back at the phone a few minutes later, There was a new message. No caller ID, no time signature. When I was a kid, my family and I moved into this new house, and right off the bat, we noticed there was some oddities happening, and we thought the place was haunted. We had, in our living room, 2 massive mirrors on either side of the walls that would face each other, and then you'd get that infinite mirror loop effect. By looking through one of the mirrors, you could also see down the hallway into a room at the end. We found that sometimes we would look through the mirror and see into the room at the end of the hallway, and there would be a small boy sitting on a dresser that was in that room. Everybody had seen the boy at the end of the hall. Eventually, I stopped even looking at that mirror because I didn't want to see it. I didn't get the feeling that he was evil or anything. I just didn't want to see him. When we had guests over, we didn't ever really talk about that. But there were several times when a guest would say that they saw a small boy sitting on the dresser through that mirror. They would even think that maybe somebody broke into our house. Hearing people talk about seeing the boy in the mirror always gave me the creeps because my room was right next to that, and I would always try to avert my gaze every time I passed by that mirror. One time, I lost a tooth and put the tooth under my pillow in hopes the tooth fairy would come get it and replace it with US currency. By this age, I didn't really believe in the tooth fairy, but it was just a fun thing I still did. I woke up the next morning and checked under my pillow to find my tooth was still there. My parents must have forgotten about it. I looked down on the ground off of my bed, and I could see that my crayons, which I kept in a coffee can, were spilt all over the ground, and there was markings on my bedroom door. I was trying to think how this could have happened, if maybe I had sleptwalked or something and drew on the door and knocked all my crayons over. Suddenly I realize I'm staring through a person. It was that boy, and he was only a couple feet away from me, and I could see him in great detail. He was translucent, and he was just staring at me. He kind of looked like he had a little bit of a smile on his face. He was wearing what looked like a Little League outfit from the 50s. You know, the pinstripe baseball outfits, and the hat. Something told me that he died as that kid in that outfit. Up until this point, I had never seen a ghost other than seeing the boy in the mirror. But this time I'm seeing him a couple feet away from me right in my face. I got really scared and just slowly laid back down in bed and put the covers over my head. It was morning and I wanted to get up so I could watch Beast Wars. After a minute or two of hiding under the covers, I decided to give it another try. I slowly removed them and peeked over the lump of my pillow, and there he was still, staring at me. He was actually there. I was just hoping the whole thing was a dream. I continued to stare at him, and then he just kind of vanished slowly, just like increasing translucence. When I think about this event now, I kind of want to research that area and see if I can find any missing persons cases involving a small boy who might have been in baseball. It kind of makes me think that maybe he wanted me to figure that out for him. Kind of like those TV shows where a clairvoyant is approached by a spirit and is badgered until they help solve the mystery of their death. Stories like these, involving a witness that can see a ghost, are often the scariest ones for me to read, due to the fact that visual hallucinations are a little bit harder to explain, if it was a hallucination at all. The witness here says that their crayons were knocked all over the ground, indicating physical evidence that correlated with the occurrence. Which begs the question, can spiritual entities interact with our physical world, or can they hurt us? In my previous video, Evil Entities, a witness claims to have been physically harmed by something in the room that they couldn't explain. They described having their arm pulled through the guardrail on their bunk bed and being ripped off of it with the guardrail. If it was some sort of spiritual entity or demon, then yes, these things can physically harm us. But why would they do that? What motive could something like that have? And if they can physically interact with our world, can they get into our digital systems, like telephones and radios, and somehow use that as a means of communication? Also in my previous video, the witness that got pulled off of the bed describes that his video game system was on and being played. Is it possible that these things are real? And is it possible that if they are, they have some sort of electromagnetic distortion that comes with them where they go? At this point, speculation is all we have to go off of. But for now, These are strange unknowns. Please be sure to subscribe if you want to keep up to date with this channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please push the like button below. I'm really enjoying making these videos, and the more support I have, the easier it gets. And remember, if you're watching these videos just before going to sleep, when you least expect it, something